They didn't see a soldier, just an old man on a folding chair, leg made of carbon fiber, hat too faded to read, sitting near the edge of a summer stage like he was part of the background, something left behind by history. A boy ran past and nearly knocked his cane loose. A woman whispered to her friend, "I think he's just here for the shade." And when the laughter from the crowd rippled over to where he sat, Ray Mitchell didn't flinch, didn't speak, just rested his calloused hand on the edge of his prosthetic and looked down at the photograph pinned to the back of his cap. A younger version of himself in desert fatigues, half smiling beside a flagpole the world had already forgotten. His son, Noah, stood backstage, clutching his speech with trembling fingers, not knowing yet that everything he had prepared was about to change. Because when Tyler Greaves, the town's favorite internet clown, pointed his phone at Ray and mocked, "Yo, check this out, Bionic Grandpa in the front row. Bet he's downloading Respect in 2G. The audience cracked up. A few parents winced, a few kids laughed too loudly, but Ray just blinked slowly and stayed still, like a statue in the sun that refused to weather. And if you believe that dignity isn't about walking fast, but about standing firm, like and subscribe, because what happens next doesn't just silence a crowd, it rewrites what they remember. The stage lights were hot on Noah's face as he stepped into view, script in hand, but his eyes never left his father. He could see Tyler still smirking, still whispering to his friends near the sound booth, holding his phone like a sword. The script in Noah's hand read, "What freedom means to me," written carefully in blue ink the night before with Ray helping him choose the words. But Noah didn't start with the script. He didn't speak at all at first. He just looked out over the crowd, at the red plastic chairs and snoozing grandparents, at the kids kicking gravel behind the food truck, at the officers near the parking lot with arms crossed. And he realized no one had seen it. Not really. Not his dad. Not what he carried. So Noah dropped the script. Literally. It fluttered to the stage like a leaf. "That's my dad," he said, pointing to Ray. The crowd glanced over. Some followed his finger. Some didn't. Tyler laughed again, louder this time, but Noah's voice didn't shake. "You laughed at his leg. You laugh like it's a punchline. Like pain is funny when it's someone else's." The wind stirred. The band kids behind the stage stopped tuning their instruments. "But that leg," Noah went on, "that leg carried 3 soldiers out of a convoy ambush. That leg stood in front of his men when bullets came from 2 directions. That leg is only here because he left the other one in the dirt 10,000 miles from this barbecue." The crowd began to still. One woman in the front row set her lemonade down without sipping it. "You want to laugh?" Noah asked, holding up the bronze star from his dad's coat pocket, one he had quietly borrowed an hour earlier. "Then laugh at this. Because he never told anyone he got this. Not me, not the school, not the town. He just shows up, every day, sits there, and lets people forget." His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. "But today I remembered. And I'm asking you to remember, too." He looked down at Tyler, whose phone now trembled slightly in his hand. "You called him Bionic Grandpa, but his name is Master Sergeant Raymond Mitchell. And he taught me that silence isn't weakness. It's restraint. Because if he said what he's seen, if he made you carry it, none of you would laugh again." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, the kind that presses on the chest. Ray slowly stood, not to speak, not to intervene, just to stand. To let them see him. A tall figure in shadowed sunlight, prosthetic gleaming, hat low, eyes distant. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. But for the first time all day, no one looked away. Behind him, a few veterans rose from their chairs and stood too. One saluted without a word. Another pressed his hand to his chest. Tyler turned his phone off. The camera light went black. And somewhere, someone started clapping. 1 beat, 2, then more. It wasn't loud. It was reverent, like a chapel filled with apology. Noah stepped off the stage and walked toward his dad. Ray looked at him and nodded once, just once. That was all it took. And when they walked off together, cane tapping rhythmically beside a carbon fiber leg. Not a single voice dared make another joke. The parade that followed that day wasn't led by officials or grand marshals. It was led by a quiet man and his son. And later, when the video surfaced, uploaded by someone in the back row who had watched it all unfold, captioned only "This changed me." It wasn't the speech people remembered. It was the silence. The moment when a town stopped laughing and finally stood. Ray didn't speak much after that day. Not to the reporters who waited outside the grocery store. Not to the veterans group who offered to hold a ceremony in his honor. Not even to the mayor who dropped by with a plaque and a forced smile. But Noah noticed something had shifted in the way his father walked, just a degree straighter, like the world that once leaned away from him had finally tilted back. The town didn't forget, not this time. The video had done something the medals never could. It showed people how quiet sacrifice looked when it wore no uniform. And suddenly, everywhere Ray went, people saw the leg first, but not to mock it. This time, they stood. At the post office, the mail clerk called him sir, without a trace of irony. At the diner, the waitress slid him an extra coffee with a napkin that read, "Thank you for staying strong." But Ray wasn't after admiration. That kind of spotlight felt too close to crosshairs. Instead, he poured himself back in the habit. Sunrise walks with his cane-tapping sidewalk cracks. Weekly visits to the cemetery on Hillcrest where he sat in silence before a headstone etched with 6 names, and the year 2006, and evenings spent at the park bench near the high school, watching kids stumble through soccer drills while Noah practiced speeches with more fire than ever. But not everyone took the lesson the way it was meant. Tyler Greaves, stripped of his audience and suddenly the villain of every comment section, simmered in the echo chamber of his own pride, blaming cancel culture, blaming old-timers, blaming everything but the silence that followed him like a shadow. He stopped posting for a while, but when he returned, it wasn't with remorse. It was with sarcasm thinly veiled as redemption. "Maybe I should get a prosthetic too," he joked in a live stream. "Then maybe people would finally take me seriously." The screen lit up with angry emojis. But Tyler didn't care. He was chasing relevance, even if it meant setting fire to bridges he never helped build. Meanwhile, the school board invited Noah to deliver his speech again, this time at the state auditorium. Ray sat in the front row, same flannel shirt, same worn hat, same prosthetic leg visible beneath neatly pressed slacks. But this time, something was different. Noah didn't just speak about sacrifice. He told the crowd how silence is armor, how some people carry entire wars in their bones, and how the bravest man he knew never needed applause, just space. He ended the speech by lifting the same bronze star, holding it above his head like a lantern, and the applause that followed wasn't claps. It was thunder. Afterward, a man in uniform approached Ray and asked quietly, "You Mitchell from Falcon Ridge?" Ray turned, surprised. "Used to be." The man grinned. "You're the one they talk about in training. Didn't think you were real." Ray's face twitched with the ghost of a smile. Most legends aren't. That night, back home, Ray opened a wooden box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were old photos, letters faded at the corners, a few dog tags, and a folded commendation signed by someone who hadn't shaken his hand in 2 decades. He handed them to Noah wordlessly. "You ever want to know more? This is the door." Noah opened the papers like relics, reverently, as if history could still breathe between the lines. But before they could finish, a knock came at the door. On the porch stood Tyler, face pale, hands shaking, eyes red. He didn't hold the phone. He didn't hold the script. Just a note. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For the joke. For what I didn't know. For what I refused to learn." Ray didn't say anything at first. Then he stepped aside. "Sit down," he said, not kindly, but not coldly either. Just steady, like he was still guarding something worth defending. Tyler sat on the porch steps, knees drawn up, like a kid who got caught stealing but didn't know why it hurt. And for the next hour, Ray talked, not loud, not bitter, but clear, about losing a leg, about losing men, about coming home to a country that only saluted during parades, about the noise people make when they're trying to ignore what they owe. Tyler didn't interrupt, didn't cry, just nodded once, then twice. When he left, he didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't deserve it. But Noah noticed Ray watched him go without the tension he once carried in his shoulders. The next morning, Tyler posted a single clip. No music, no captions, just Ray's voice. There's no such thing as an ex-soldier. Just men waiting to be seen again. The post went viral. Again. But this time, it wasn't for controversy. It was for truth. Schools called. Podcasts reached out. A museum in D.C. requested to archive Ray's story. But Ray only agreed to one thing: helping Noah build a local veteran speaking program at the school. Not so they remember me, he said. So they remember themselves. And when they launched it, first with 6 students, then 20, then 50, Ray sat in the back. Same hat, same silence, until a student asked the final question of the night. Why didn't you ever tell us before? Ray looked up, his eyes tired but alive. Because the truth doesn't shout, he said. It waits. And when the noise dies down, it walks in. They never put up a statue, never named a street after him, never threw a parade down Main in his honor, and Ray Mitchell wouldn't have wanted any of that anyway. What they did was simpler, quieter, and more permanent. They listened. The school auditorium where Noah first stood now had a plaque on the sidewall, bronze, small, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. It didn't have Ray's name. Just 6 words he once said, etched in silence. The truth doesn't shout. It waits. That was enough. Because by then, everyone knew who had said it. Word had spread beyond the town. Schools in 3 counties had reached out, inviting Noah and Ray to share what they started. Veterans who had never spoken a word about what they saw overseas were coming forward, some with tears, some with pictures, most just with the same look Ray had worn all those years, the one that said, "I carried this alone for too long." But Ray was never looking to be the voice of anything. He was just a man who showed up, who stood still while others forgot how to, who raised a son to recognize dignity not by medals, but by how someone treated the silence after being mocked. It was Noah who carried the mission now, walking school halls with a purpose that no textbook could have taught. He wore the bronze star on a simple chain, tucked under his shirt, not to flaunt it, but to feel its weight. He once told his classmates, "Every time you forget what someone's lived through, you risk repeating what they barely survived." And somehow, that landed deeper than any assembly. Ray's health declined fast, faster than they expected. The leg, the spine, the lungs, all catching up to the years he gave away for someone else's freedom. The VA visits grew more frequent, the steps slower, the silences longer. But he never stopped showing up to Noah's events, even if it meant sitting in the back with a blanket across his lap and that old army cap pulled low enough to shadow the pain. He'd nod at the right moments, lift a single finger during applause, his version of standing ovation, and when people came up after to thank him, he'd just shake his head and say, "It's not about me. It's about what comes next." The last time he spoke at the school, his voice was gravel, his posture slouched. But his eyes? Still steady. He said, "I didn't lose a leg. I gave it." There's a difference. Losing means it was taken. Giving means you chose. And for the first time, every student stood, not because they were told to, but because something inside them did. A month later, Ray passed in his sleep. No hospital, no tubes, just his chair by the window, the blanket over his lap, his cane leaning beside him, and Noah's speech notes on the table with a note scrawled in pen. "You say it better than I ever could." The funeral wasn't flashy. A folded flag, 7 rifles, and a small crowd of people who finally understood who'd been among them. Tyler Greaves was there, hand shaking, camera left behind. He didn't speak. He just stood in the back and cried like someone who'd seen his own reflection too clearly. Noah gave the eulogy. He didn't read from paper. He didn't rehearse. He just looked out at the rows of people and said, "My father taught me that silence is a choice. And so is respect. Every time you laugh at someone's limp, their stutter, their scars, you choose what side of history you want to be on." And then he paused. Let the silence do what Ray always said it would. After the burial, they opened Ray's locker at the local VFW hall. Inside were just a few things: an old folded map, a dog tag on a cracked leather string, and a sealed envelope addressed to Noah. Inside was a letter, not long, not dramatic, but one line stood out and would later be carved into the same school wall beside the plaque. We don't get to choose what we carry, but we do get to choose who we become because of it. Months passed, then years. The video of Noah's first speech still made the rounds on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day, sometimes in history class. But for Noah, the legacy didn't live online. It lived in how he looked people in the eye, how he paused before judging someone, how he taught kids not to raise their voices, but their awareness. He became a teacher. History, of course. And every semester, he started with the same question: who here has ever felt invisible? And hands always rose, some slowly, some in shame. But that was the moment the room changed. That was when Ray Mitchell lived again, not as a headline, not as a cautionary tale, but as a compass. Noah kept the prosthetic leg, not on display, just in the closet, beside the folded flannel and the old cane. Some days he'd take it out and sit with it, not to mourn, but to remember. That strength doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes, it just looks like sitting still when the world turns its back. The town changed too. There were fewer jokes now, fewer eye rolls, more kids asking about their grandfathers, more teens walking slower when they saw someone older crossing the street. Not because they were told to, but because they saw someone else do it first. And so the story of the man with the prosthetic leg wasn't just a moment. It became a movement. Not loud, not forced, but steady. Like footsteps that no longer need to prove where they've been, because they know exactly where they're going.